Hello and welcome to NewsWatch with me, SAMIRA AHMED. Did the BBC allow its bulletins to be used by the attackers in Woolwich to spread their message? Were the images of the attack shown on the BBC too graphic and insensitive? And were some of the voices heard discussing the incident too inflammatory? Wednesday saw the unprecedented street murder by Islamic radicals of drummer Lee Rigby in Woolwich. The response of BBC News over the next few hours raised several questions in the minds of viewers.
Some news that's come in the past few moments, and it is from the Metropolitan Police from Scotland Yard, confirming that officers have responded to an incident in John Wilson Street in Woolwich.
The strongest reaction concerned footage of one of the suspects attempting to explain the reasons behind the attack, which was filmed on a passerby's mobile phone. Stuart Pearce was one of several hundred with this view. What a disgrace for the BBC and other press to let this person who has just killed one of our soldiers have a chance on a worldwide stage to justify what he has just done. Do they not realise the propaganda value of this broadcast? As more information began to emerge, Nick Robinson made this comment on the News at 6.
Senior Whitehall sources have told me, and I simply cannot confirm this, but they are senior sources, that the police now believe that the attackers were, and I quote, of Muslim appearance, that they filmed their attack and they shouted Allahu Akbar.
The BBC's political editor later apologised for the use of that phrase, of Muslim appearance, which attracted the ire of Willie Shepherd. There are Muslims from all over the world and pretty much all racial and many ethnic backgrounds. This seems a real slipping of editorial standards into a prejudicial statement and should be much to the shame of the BBC. Some complaints concern the choice of guests discussing the attack, with concerns over a news channel interview with Asghar Bukhari from the Muslim Public Affairs Committee and Newsnight's interview with the radical Islamist preacher Anjem Chowdhury. For others, the objection was to the images described here by Jenny Jarvis. I was appalled the BBC televised the attacker with his hands covered in blood and still holding a knife, then showed the dead soldier in the road. The possibility the relatives could have seen this before knowing it was their loved one is utterly despicable. I can find no reason why someone authorised this to be shown. Some of the strong views we received there from viewers, and with me to discuss them is the head of the BBC newsroom, Mary Hockaday, and one of the viewers who contacted us this week, Rowan Coleman. Rowan Coleman first. Talk about the visuals, the images that the BBC showed. What was your concern about them?
The bottom line, my concern was this was a murderer with the blood of his victim on his hands. And immediately in the aftermath of carrying out the crime, as one of the other emails said, with a glimpse of the body in the background. And to me, that just seemed entirely inappropriate, that it wasn't the right place or time to show that footage. And I don't feel that that footage should be shown on mainstream TV news at all. No,
okay.
I don't.
That's a very specific concern, Mary Hockaday, and a lot of viewers were unhappy about that. A lot of blood visible in aerials, as well as seeing one of the suspects up close with his hands covered in blood with a weapon.
This was a very challenging day in the newsroom and other newsrooms too. Really shocking events unfolding quite quickly, and then this flow of material that begins to appear. We looked very hard at the material that was coming in and thought really carefully about what to use, because we knew how upsetting those images were. In the end, we didn't use all the footage that was available, but we did decide to use some of it, and certainly earlier in the day, and obviously particularly pre-watershed, we were really careful to give clear warnings. Later in the evening, the audience is slightly different. We flag, perhaps with the language in the cues, to be clear about the nature of what's coming up.
What about the use of the video, Rowan? Because, you know, they didn't just show images of this man, you also heard what he had to say and what he wanted people to hear.
I mean, I feel, if I can just answer that point as well, I just feel that this is an absolute watershed moment in broadcasting. This is, obviously this has never happened before, and obviously you were responding to it very quickly. But the difference between this content being on our TV channels and being on the internet is an editorial one. If people want to go to the internet, they can look at whatever they want to look. But this is a point where you have to draw the line, I think, on what is moral and what is decent. And to show a murderer with blood on his hands, to me, is completely crosses that line. And if he had attacked a woman or a child, would you have still shown that footage? And really, did the context of the possible terrorist attack justify it? And I don't think that it did. And then to go back to the second point, to allow him to speak and to voice the reason that he had carried out this awful attack, well, on 2 points, it showed him triumphant after he had murdered a human being whose relatives, like we say, could have been watching, or relatives of the soldiers in the barracks who wouldn't know who it was yet because he hadn't been identified, that hadn't been made public. And secondly, I feel that giving a platform, allowing those words to go out with the video, is then almost justifying what he did. He did something terrible and he got what he wanted at the end of it.
I mean, on the distressing images, we know they are distressing, and we know that we will have a range of reactions from across the audience, and you're not alone in how you felt. And we do know that. What we then try to do is find the point we feel is appropriate to tell the story, to make sure that for people who may not want to see it, that we flag it. And we made our judgments about what to use, and as I say, there was more that we certainly didn't use. On the issue, yes, on the issue of the audio, which I think is also a really important and interesting point, and again, one we thought really hard about. Because we understand, of course, the issue of providing a platform, but our view was, as the story was unfolding in those first hours, that we were endeavouring to report what had happened, but also to try to begin to illuminate. And one of the issues, of course, is motivation. And the audio began to take you to understanding, and this is not about justifying, but perhaps understanding some of what had happened.
We thought very with stills and a graphic. I mean, if someone else went out and did this tomorrow, would the BBC run their audio footage?
Well, our job is to show and explain, and this footage existed, it had happened, people on the streets of Woolwich had heard it, and we felt that it was important to share it.
Without having to actually broadcast it, which is, as Rowan says, exactly what they wanted.
Well, we felt it was valuable in the early stages of telling the story to show it, because that's how people best can make their own minds up. We certainly didn't use it in a sort of thoughtless way, and actually, as time went on, used it less and less. But in those early stages, it felt part of helping audiences understand what had happened.
One other important point: many people have complained about some of the guests who've been appearing to analyse this story, notably Anjem Chowdhury, who was on Newsnight on Thursday. A concern that this was adding to a kind of febrile atmosphere, was not illuminating. We know what these people's points of view are. Why was the BBC still putting them on air?
Our approach to this story, as with all stories, is to talk to a really wide range of people and to provide a wealth of reaction, again to serve understanding. Newsnight thought very hard about whether or not to approach Anjem Chowdhury, and for a couple of important reasons decided it was the right and purposeful thing to do. Not least, by the time Newsnight went out, we knew and we had evidence that one of the suspects was an associate of his, and therefore there were legitimate and valid questions to put to him. The other really important point was making sure that Kirsty, but also some of her other guests, were there in the studio challenging him extremely hard, as they did, about some of the views that he holds. So that's the thinking that went into it. We didn't run many interviews with him. We certainly weren't putting him on, live on the airways. But in the context of Newsnight's journalism, and handled in the way that we did, I think it was an appropriate thing to do.
We'll have to leave it there, but Mary Hockaday and Rowan Coleman, thank you both very much indeed. Please let us know your thoughts on those issues or on any other aspect of BBC News. Stay tuned for details of how to contact us. Just time this week for a couple of other topics, starting with that tornado that hit Oklahoma on Monday. Terry Pearson raised a question debated recently on this programme in this email sent on Wednesday. It's still blanket coverage, meaning other stories don't get covered. Yes, it's awful that 23 people have died, but natural events like this happen somewhere in the world every week and don't get the continued excessive coverage given to Oklahoma. As far as the BBC is concerned, stories with lots of good video, such as is inevitably available on a USA story, are much more likely to be covered than a story without pictures. Finally, Nigel Farage has featured in our inbox again this week after the UKIP leader had been confronted by protesters in an Edinburgh pub, but before he'd walked out in the middle of a BBC Scotland radio interview. Gavin Esler on the News Channel interviewed the party's economy spokesman, Godfrey Bloom.
You know Nigel Farage very well, and he has got this reputation as the bloke in the saloon bar and so on. But do you think it's telling on him? I mean, he works very hard. Perhaps he smokes and drinks too much as well.
Well, he's never pretended to be a priest, and if you don't mind me suggesting that, I regard that as a rather impertinent remark.
Well,
how dare you suggest he should smoke or drink? What the hell has it got to do with you?
I apologise if you take it that way. I didn't mean it in that sense.
Mr. Bloom wasn't the only one to take umbrage at that line of questioning. We received this email from David Payne. I was amazed when Gavin Esler suggested that Nigel Farage smoked and drank too much. What gives this man the right to make remarks like that? His idea of acceptable levels of smoking and drinking are his, and probably should not be used when commenting on news stories. I found his attitude offensive. Thanks for all your comments this week. If you want to share your opinions on BBC News and Current Affairs, or even appear on the programme, you can call us on 0370 010 6676 or email newswatch@bbc.co.uk. You can find us on Twitter @NewsWatchBBC, and you can watch previous issues we've discussed in the programme archive on our website at bbc.co.uk/newswatch. That's all from us. We'll be back to hear your thoughts about BBC News coverage again next week. Goodbye.